to the shock and just a disbelief and feeling like they were going to lose hope, that there wasn't anything else they could do except just talk about it. If it was going to continue, the activism was going to continue to be crushed. So we leaned on Kathy's Tell Them, we leaned on her Dear Mata Filipinam, and we leaned on her talk back to the world of the planet that they demand. And so as I was getting ready to come here, I asked the students and turn it back on them, how would you describe Kathy, her impact with you, her writing, her lessons in your life? Their list is long, but some of their words were fierce, determined, proud, brave, courageous, inspiring. One student said she gave us words to stand up to justice. She's made me feel more confident in speaking and in fighting for myself. One student said, she's really famous, but she didn't make us feel intimidated when she came to talk to us. So, Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner, we have a poem for you from the students, and they, my 52 student class, compiled a poem called Tell Them to Kathy. We prepared a package for our friends in the islands, wondering why we don't know what has been so old. Knowledge, the norm, the stories for all those, elders, babies, the mamas, we should ally forevermore. Climate warriors of our planet, watch out because they stand for all lives, island lives, urgently, they say. The marshals, Kiribati, Tuvalu, to name a few, who will rise in this moment for all who knew. We won't stop for the truth. We won't take lies in the textbooks. Not just a lesson for class. It's planet activism through and through. It's about my home, your home, my community, North Portland family too. It's about my future, my tomorrow, but first, it's my today. Climate justice, we stand from North Portland this day, sending with love this package your way. From our Roosevelt students to you, Kathy. Kathy, in the last 3 years, has appeared and spoken at 3 UN climate talks. We had the pleasure of hosting her October 2016 as the PPS Climate Justice Committee, and we are so pleased to have her back. We'd like to thank our sponsors from the Climate Justice Committee, ReThinking Schools, and PAT Social Justice and Community Outreach Committee. And most of all, we'd like to thank Nancy, where is Nancy, for setting up this beautiful library and providing the space for us. Without further ado, please give it up for Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner.
I'm not sure where I should stand, if I should, because I've still got this going on. Hi, everyone. So as Moy has introduced, I'm Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner. I'm a poet and an educator. I'll say that lightly because there's a lot of teachers here who do way more educating than me. But yeah, I'm a poet and I do workshops, but I primarily focus on poetry and performance at the moment. That's my full-time gig. Besides that, I also run a nonprofit back home, and I do a lot of international work, speaking on climate change and also on nuclear issues. And so I'm going to be sharing kind of my journey with you all, and then interspersing it with some poems, just a few kind of oldies but goodies. I'll have another poem in there as well, and I think that's about it. So I guess. And I just want to thank Moy for that beautiful poem. It was so nice and so sweet. The Roosevelt kids, I definitely I feel a little bit of a connection to Roosevelt because of Moy, who's constantly brought me back, and I have family members who go and attend Roosevelt, and they tell me about Moy's class and how much she's inspired them. And I also want to definitely thank Bill, who's done a lot to get me out here to educators and to schools as well, and has been a great support from the get-go, and should definitely be my business manager because I forgot books, so that's my bad. But we'll talk about that later. It's okay. There you go. So I did prepare a little bit of a presentation to kind of help guide this conversation. So it's a little bit more talking story, and then I'll give you a background first on the Marshalls, for those who have no idea about where the Marshalls is. So the Marshalls is located in the Northern Pacific region, in Oceania. It's a part of a group called Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands is an independent nation. We do have a relationship with the U.S. that allows us free entry, which I'll get into a little bit more. It's we've been living there for thousands of years. This is what the islands looks like. It's completely flat, as you can see, and they're all thin, narrow strips of land. They're atolls, essentially, right? And that there's about 60 atolls in our country, and and there's about 60,000 people living in the Marshalls. So we were living there for about thousands of years. So we were canoe makers, voyagers, weavers. So I brought actually some of our weaving today. I should probably. These are our mats that were woven from pandanus fibers. And you can actually take them around and just feel them. But these are fine woven mats, and this is what we used to wear. And so besides that, we were also one of the greatest navigators, I'd like to say, but you know, biased opinion. Some of the greatest navigators and voyagers in the Pacific. We were also storytellers, chanters, and you know, a lot of culture developed over thousands of years of us living in our islands. So after a couple of years, after a while of living there with no, European or colonial influence, the Germans came. So as you can see, that was the first colonial force. Then my great-grandfather was German. So he's the guy over there with glasses, and that's my grandfather over there. My great-grandfather with glasses over there. So yeah, there's definitely German influence in our country. After the Germans came the Japanese, and there was Japanese occupied our islands, and then the U.S. came and liberated us, and then we became a territory of the U.S. So all of Micronesia became a territory of the U.S., and that's when the U.S. began the program to test nuclear weapons in our islands. And so the U.S. tested over 60 nuclear weapons in our islands, one of which was the Bravo bomb, which is 10,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima weapon. So I know this is all about climate change, but I like to always begin with a little bit of background to kind of ground people so they understand where we're coming from into conversations on climate change. And so nuclear legacy has definitely influenced my work, and it's definitely influenced the way that I look at climate change. So nuclear testing, so besides the weapons, these huge, over 60 nuclear weapons, that's a lot, 10,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima weapon. Besides that, there was also fallout that actually affected islands that were occupied by people. And so, we saw some really horrific effects on our people, and we still have some of the highest cancer rates in the world today because of the nuclear testing that was conducted. And so the first poem I'm gonna perform for you guys is called History Project, and it's a basic introduction to the nuclear issues in the Marshalls. And so I thought I'd start with that. Okay. So I should also explain that I use spoken word in my presentations because I see it as a useful tool for sharing these kinds of stories. And so this is the first spoken word poem that I kind of put out there a while back, and I wrote it when I was in college because I was really tired of every time meeting somebody, nobody really knows what nuclear testing is, and they don't know where our islands are, even though we know what the U.S. is. We know about the U.S. history. So it got a little frustrating to constantly have to explain it, and I figured, hey, let me just write a poem about it. So, at 15, I decided to do my history project on nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. Time to learn my history, I decide. I weave through book after article after websites, all on how the U.S. once used my island home for nuclear testing. I sift through political jargon. Tables of nuclear weapons with names like Operation Bravo, Crossroads, and Ivy. Quotes from generals like, 90,000 people are out there. Who cares? I flip through snapshots of American Marines and nurses branded white with bloated grins, sucking beers and tossing beach balls along our shores. And my islander ancestors, cross-legged before a general, listening to his fairy tale about how it's for the good of mankind. To hand over our islands. Let them blast radioactive energy into our lazy-limbed coconut trees, into sagging breadfruit trees, into busy fishes that sparkle like new sun, into coral reefs brilliant as an aurora borealis woven beneath a glassy sea. God will thank you, they told us. Yeah, As if God himself ordained those powdered flakes to drift onto our hair, our eyes, our skin, to seep into our bones. We mistook radioactive fallout for snow. God will thank you, they told us, as if God's just been waiting for my people to vomit, vomit, vomit all of humanity's sins onto impeccable white shores gleaming like the cross burned into our open, scarred palms. At one point in my research, I stumbled along a photograph of goats tied to American ships, bored and munching on tubs of grass. At the bottom, a caption read, "Goats and pigs were left on naval ships as test subjects. Thousands of letters flew in from America protesting animal abuse." At 15, I want megatons of TNT, radioactive energy, and a fancy degree, anything and everything I could ever need to send ripples of death through people who put goats before human beings, so their skin can shrivel beneath the glare of hospital room lights 3 generations later as they watch their mother, their cousin, their auntie's life drip across that same black screen, knots of knuckles tied to steel beds, cold and absent of any breath, but I'm only 15. So I finished my project. Graph my people's death by cancer on flowcharts in 3D. Glue stick my ancestors' voice onto a poster board I bought from Office Max. Glue stick my ancestors' voice onto a poster board I bought from Office Max. Staple tables screaming the millions of dollars they stuffed into our mouths generation after generation after generation, and at the top, I spray painted in bold stenciled yellow, "For the good of mankind." And I entered it into a school district-wide competition called History Day. My parents were proud, and so was my teacher. And when the 3 balding white judges finally came around to my project, one of them looked at it and said, "Yeah, but it wasn't really for the good of mankind, though, was it?" And I lost. Thank you.